Hello colleagues, this is Darcy Nurkala. I am here to talk about the Taylor Center for Missions Computing. We are in the business of engaging faculty, staff, and students in supporting the computing needs of the global missions community. In addition, I hope to share with you a little bit about social entrepreneurship and how that fits so well with our organization and the initiative that I hope to kick off here. And then we'll talk more specifically about the initiative that I hope to get your participation in. But first, a little bit about social entrepreneurship. What did I learn from my social entrepreneurship class that will help us in our organization at the Taylor Center for Missions Computing? I think the first thing that I learned is that the lean startup is an ongoing cycle. It never ends. It's something that's iterative. We repeat it again and again. And really, we're going to come up with an idea. We're going to go talk to customers. We're going to review that customer feedback and then take it back to, I'm going to fine-tune that idea again. Or if my review of my customer feedback and my customers really have told me that this idea is not feasible, then I'm going to pivot and try to find a way to accomplish some of the same goals, maybe in a different way, or meet a different customer need that I didn't anticipate or didn't know about. And so that's one of the big points of the lean startup, is this iterative cycle. You fail fast so that you can regroup and go at it again with a new idea. And this helps us to get closer and closer to the actual customer need, and then proceed in implementing a business with a small minimum viable product, which I'll talk about in the next slide a little bit. But that gives us this idea of how can we iteratively do better each time we go through this cycle. The next thing that we need to talk about is the value proposition and the minimum viable product. So when we're looking at talking to our customers and coming up with our ideas about our project, our product, we need to look at what is the pain of the customer, what is their real need, or what is their real problem. I might have a really good idea of what I think that is, but then when I talk to the customer may have a completely different perspective. So it's really important for me to answer this question about what is the pain that the customer has. And then once I've kind of thought about what that pain is and talked to some customers, maybe I've already thought of what the pain is, and I think I have a solution, right? And so I also need to know what's the gain to the customer with the solution that I am using or want to bring to the table. And sometimes I might have identified the pain correctly, but I haven't provided a good solution for the customer. So in this cycle of going from what's the pain, what's the gain, talking to the customers, revamping my idea, maybe pivoting, those are all the things that I need to keep in mind as I go through this process of trying to take away the pain for the customer and give them the gain that they're looking for. Now, once I've gone through that cycle a little bit, I might have an idea about what it is that I need to bring to market, and that would be the minimum viable product. I need to look for the product that's going to meet the least requirements, but still satisfies the things that will solve that pain and bring that gain. And it doesn't need to be a full-blown thing. It just needs to be enough to solve that pain and that gain, and then test that out with my customers to say, hey, is this really what you're looking for? And again, if that minimum viable product needs to be adjusted, I haven't invested a whole bunch of money and time into something that really isn't going to satisfy anybody's needs. So using that pain idea and that gain idea and creating that minimum viable product and getting that feedback from the customers, those things are all going to save me time and money and satisfy the customer much better in the long run. And so this iterative process, this constantly going back to the customer, this is going to help me bring a product to market faster and cheaper and meet real needs for my customers. I think the other thing that's important, and this is something that I found even in my own personal business experience, is really understanding who the real customer is. There's different roles, and I don't know if other people will think that this is important, but for me it's really important, because the customer might be the customer and the person that's making the purchase, but they might not be. Somebody else might be the buyer. The customer is down at a lower level, and the person actually bringing the funds to the table is actually the buyer, and that person is going to actually do the purchase. The other person that we have to think about in terms of the customer is the influencer. Who's going to influence those decisions that are being made about what the customer is going to buy? It might not be the customer themselves. It could be other people around them, their team, their management, maybe people that they're actually working with. In my particular case, when we get to my product, it'll probably be parents and other professors are going to be influencing my customer to make a decision one way or the other. The other thing we need to look at is whether or not the customer is the decision maker. And this is one that we get stuck with a lot in business, in terms of we think we've identified the customer and the person that's actually going to purchase the product, but when it really comes right down to it, the decision maker is at an entirely different level and has that ability to say yes or no, and the customer may really, really want your product, but if that decision maker isn't on board and isn't on board early, you are going to be in a bad place when you think you have this sale made and the decision maker hasn't been a part of the discussion this whole time. The other person that we need to look out for, who really isn't a customer but is a saboteur. It's the person who your product might solve a problem that they've got their own little maybe their own pet peeve about, or that they're lobbying for a different solution with a different company or organization. And so if within that team of people that your customer is a part of and your decision maker is a part of and your buyer is a part of, if there's somebody on that team that really doesn't want your product, they may go out of their way to become one of those influencers and try to influence the whole team to say, hey, this isn't going to work and here's why, or we don't like this company and here's why. And it may be valid things, it may not be valid things, but you need to be aware as a product producer that there could be saboteurs on that team that really don't want you messing with their business. So those are things that are really important, because you need to have that decision maker on board, you need to have that buyer on board, and they may or may not be the customer. And these are things that we have to keep in mind. And when I've been in business, this has been a problem. I had a customer, didn't realize that that customer was not the decision maker, and lots of software had to be redone because we didn't understand who the real customer was. So how do I stay in business? Well, if you look at any of the material out there about just businesses in general, mostly they use a funnel kind of metaphor where you're bringing customers in, you bring them through this kind of narrow part, and then you try to sell them even more things and then have that come back around. So they call that get, keep, and grow. I've got that here on this particular slide. And the get idea is that, hey, how do we get customers? How do we acquire them and activate them? Well, we might bring in a whole bunch of people into this process of kind of looking at our product, but how do we get them motivated to go from just looking to buying? And that's something that's the first step in trying to keep your customers with you. And obviously, if you don't have any customers, you aren't going to stay in business. Then you need to figure out how to keep the customers you have. How are you going to stay connected to them? How do you build loyalty? How do you provide upgrades? What are the ways in which we can provide ongoing service or an ongoing product that's going to keep those customers loyal to our organization or wanting to come back for more? I don't have it here on this slide, but there can be a loop here between the get and the keep, in that you get a customer, they might refer other people, and then you're going to be able to acquire more and activate more customers, which can be, again, another iterative loop where we're getting customers, keeping them, getting more. After we've kind of built up some of that loyalty, there may be opportunities to grow that even more. We're going to leverage that customer relationship for further sales and referrals. We can do things like cross-sell, upsell, to try to offer that customer something more than what they had before, something that maybe they didn't even know they wanted. But we see this a lot in Amazon, where they're recommending things to the customer. You read this book and they say, oh, everybody else liked this one too. You should get that one. And that's kind of the idea that we want to do here in the grow area. The other thing that you can do in the grow area is not just your own products, but how can you maybe leverage some other partnerships to say, hey, let's make a package deal that will allow the customer to get a discount if they buy this thing from you and this thing from us, and together, if they buy the whole package, we'll give them a better deal. And those would be ways to grow, get, and keep customers. And especially in that idea of that partnership, maybe you have access now to a whole different market than you did before because you've kind of connected yourself to another product as well. So these are just some things to think about: how to stay in business, get those customers, keep those customers, build some loyalty, and then look at how do we go ahead and make those customers become customers again, or invite us to additional customers. So what I learned in social entrepreneurship, about social entrepreneurship, and really the two big takeaways that I've got is the idea of scalability and the idea of positive social impact. Now, scalability is where, how can I take what I'm doing and either reproduce it to become a bigger product or affect more people in some way, or how can I make it a framework or a process that can be repeated by others with the same kind of impact. We want it to not just be contained with just the one organization or just with a few people that are being affected by the social entrepreneurship idea. We want it to be scalable and affecting many people, and that's there in that first little figure. Secondly, we want to have a positive social impact. So this is different than regular businesses, and regular businesses might have a positive social impact, but the social entrepreneur is actually looking specifically for a product or a process that is going to create positive social impact. And the little figure I chose for this was this missing puzzle piece. Where are the hurts or the pains that are affecting society in a negative way, and how can we fill in those puzzle pieces in such a way that they become your new, that they become whole, right? That you've got a positive social impact because you're filling in a particular puzzle piece and taking away some of that pain for somebody. And so this idea of scalability and this idea of positive social impact being pulled together are both important to the social entrepreneur and to social entrepreneurship. You have to have both in order to be considered a social entrepreneur. So those are the things that I've really felt like my big takeaways that I think are important to an organization like the Center for Missions Computing. And hopefully you can understand how these are going to fit well with the next part of my presentation, which is about the initiative that I would like to start at the Taylor Center for Missions Computing. I am in charge of donor relations at the Taylor Center for Missions Computing, and I also do a lot of work with the students who do some of the missions computing work. And so we really, if I were to take down from our general idea that we want to get staff, faculty, and students all involved in missions computing, this initiative that I'm working on is really focused on computer science students who really want to serve the world in need. And so as we go through this presentation, I've kind of narrowed the focus of what it is that I hope to accomplish down to looking specifically at computer science students. So where have we been? Where are we going? So the Taylor Center for Missions Computing was established in 2010. So it's really only about 8, 9